Let's talk some more about Measure 114. That's the gun law that just passed in Oregon. Voters approved it last week, and the Secretary of State says it's going to take effect in just over 3 weeks on Thursday, December 8th. And that's if the law is not challenged in court, which it is expected to be. Now, Measure 114 bans high-capacity magazines and creates a new permit process to buy a gun, including safety training, a background check, and a fee. There are still a lot of questions about this, and we have a few answers for you in just a minute. But one thing we do know right now is that gun sales, or at least people trying to buy guns in Oregon, those things are just skyrocketing. Here's the latest data from the state police. From 2018 to this past Monday, there have been a total of nearly 1.6 million background checks for people who want to buy a gun. The FICS you see at the top there stands for Firearms Instant Check System, which is the background check that happens in the hopes of flagging people who are not supposed to legally buy a firearm and who cannot. Here's a look at the daily averages of those background checks. You can see on the left side, 2018, 2019, it's around 750 to 800 every day. And then on the right side, you can see the pre-election number of about 850. And now, after this past election, well, the system's averaging about 4,000 every single day. In fact, the state police tell us that last week, during the week of the election, there were over 18,000 of these transactions. And if you're thinking of heading out to buy a gun before Measure 114 is set to take effect, get ready. There is quite a backlog already. You can see the backlog jumped right after the COVID restrictions took effect in early 2020, fluctuated for a couple of years before being eliminated over the summer, and then spiked just before the election. On the right side there, it looks like it's on the way to the moon, nearly a vertical line on that graph. So we're not just here on TV saying that people are rushing to buy guns before 114 takes effect. We're actually showing you the data that backs it up. So here's what's happening next. First, state police is responsible for making a standardized application that sheriff's offices and police departments across the state can then give people who hope to buy a gun. But that application has not been finalized yet, so you can bet OSP is scrambling to get that thing done. And here's an interesting note. According to the Oregonian, even people who drafted the measure, well, they thought if it was approved, it wouldn't take effect until the middle of January. Now, that's a month after votes are certified. But according to the Secretary of State's office, voter-approved measures like this, well, they actually take effect a month after Election Day, not a month after certification day. There's a difference, a big difference, 30 days. It effectively gives the agencies a month less to plan and prepare. So if things feel a bit rushed, yeah, they are. Now let's answer some of your questions on this. John asked, how does this measure apply to people who already have a CHL, which is a concealed handgun license? Does that permit qualify a buyer to make a gun purchase? And Mike asked something similar. This is the same process that someone has to go through in order to get a concealed carry permit. So does this mean you automatically get a concealed permit, or you go through this process twice? Well, we actually received some clarification on that from the Lincoln County Sheriff, Curtis Landers. Sheriff Landers says Measure 114 is comparable to the concealed handgun license process, but the CHL is actually a little bit different. The training course required for Measure 114 requires a demonstration to load, unload, store, and fire the firearm. Sheriff Landers says if a CHL course offers all of those things, great, then it does apply to Measure 114 for a permit. But he notes that most CHL courses do not include the firing of the gun, and that needs to be part of the class in order to be used under 114. Now, after 114 takes effect, you cannot buy a gun with only a concealed handgun license. You would need to go through the 114 permitting process. And it's interesting to note that the permit is needed for private gun sales as well. Now, Landers does note there are some exceptions, limited exceptions, and most apply to transfers between relatives. And then we get to the magazine capacity part of the measure. Now, restricting it to 10 rounds or fewer is under the new law. Sheriff Landers says that it is legal to purchase and keep higher capacity magazines until the law takes effect. I was a little confused on that. That's why I stumbled. But it's only as long as you have proof that you bought them before December 8th of this year, or if the law is put on hold because of a lawsuit, whenever the law does take effect, if it ever does. Basically, listen, if you're going to buy those high-capacity magazines, keep your receipts. The magazine restriction part of 114 is already being challenged as unconstitutional in California. That's part of a different federal lawsuit before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Ninth Circuit also has jurisdiction over Oregon, though. So if they rule it unconstitutional in California, that effectively slashes that part of it in Oregon as well. Now, there's obviously a lot that has to happen in a short amount of time for Measure 114, and we're going to be staying on top of it. We do want to end this segment with a quote from Lincoln County Sheriff Curtis Landers that we think many of you may well appreciate. He says, "I've been asked if our office plans on enforcing the law. Yes, we do plan on enforcing the law if it is ruled constitutional by any court challenge. While I may not agree with Measure 114 and was openly against it prior to the election, I have sworn to an oath to uphold the laws of this state, regardless of my opinion." If you've been following this, you know that the Lynn County and Union County sheriffs don't feel that way. They both said they will not enforce the law if or when it's enacted. And this week, the Marion County Sheriff said his office will not focus investigations on magazine capacity issues, citing limited staffing and resources. So now, it's a waiting game. It's expected that 114 will face numerous legal hurdles, but so far, no lawsuits have been filed here in Oregon.